Chapter 8 is a vision. And this follows the vision in chapter 7. Daniel had that vision, as he says at the beginning of chapter 7, in the first year of Belshazzar. Alright, so in the third year of King Belshazzar, so this is a couple of years after the last vision. This is about the year 550 or so BC. Daniel chapters 5 and 6 haven't happened yet. Belshazzar has not died. The Persians have not yet taken over. That's a little more than 10 years away. This is the third year of King Belshazzar. I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. That's in Daniel 7. So he already knows about that one. That vision, which of course that vision itself is a corresponding vision to Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2. But Daniel himself didn't have that dream. So he already has had the vision of chapter 7. And he finished that vision at the end of chapter 7 by saying, I was deeply troubled. And I kept the matter to myself. He didn't tell anybody about it. He kept the matter to himself. He was deeply troubled. Of course, that vision itself matched up with the dream Nebuchadnezzar had in chapter 2, which Daniel himself didn't see, but he interpreted it for him. That would have been like 50 years earlier. So now Daniel is seeing another vision. He has a few more of these to go through by the time he's all said and done. So this is the third year of Belshazzar's reign. This is about 550 BC. Daniel would be about 75-ish years old maybe here. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. So clearly he wasn't actually there. I don't know where he was physically at this point in time, but he saw himself in the vision at this citadel of Susa in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns, standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged toward the west and the north and the south. He already has the east. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He came toward the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged at him in great rage. I saw him attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering his 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became very great. But at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. So there was one horn sticking up right between the eyes, a large horn. What was the word? A prominent horn, excuse me. Large. Prominent in the English word in verse 5 is prominent, and in verse 8 it is large. And it was between the eyes, and it was broken off, and 4 prominent horns took its place. And they grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. So they each grew in different directions, basically. The 4 winds of heaven and the 4 corners of the earth, I think, kind of all refer to the idea that there's 4 directions on the earth. North, south, east, west. There's 4, cardinal directions of the earth. That 4 is basically the number of the earth. So 4 prominent horns with the 4 winds of heaven basically mean they're all growing in a different direction. Now the other cat is out here. Out of one of them came another horn. So one of these 4 horns grew another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east and towards the beautiful land. That's Israel. Now remember, in the Bible, All of our directions are oriented around Israel. This has been true since the beginning, and it will be true all the way through the end. So north, south, east, west in the Bible relates to how things appear from Israel. We saw way back in the beginning of Genesis when they talked about the garden in the east. Okay, well that means east of Israel. So what are you doing, cat? Like, what is your problem? Why are you looking at me like that? Go away. So that means east of Israel. So the garden being in the east means it was east of Israel somewhere. And being sent to the east means you're being sent away from Israel somehow. You can't go to the west because there's a sea right there. Okay, Egypt is to the south. And invaders came from the north. We talked about that before when Jeremiah gave his prophecies about this invading force from the north. Well, he's talking about Babylon. And on a map, if you look at a map, Babylon is really more east of Israel than anything. But it's consistently described as this invading force from the north because they would get there from the north. There was a desert east of Israel, and it was difficult to cross that desert. Invading forces, if they were coming anywhere from Egypt, would come from the north because they couldn't go from the west because there was a sea there, and to the east was a desert. So Babylon directionally is actually east of Israel, but it was portrayed as coming from the north because they would have to go up and around the desert and come in from the north. So our directions in the Bible are always oriented around Israel. So the north, and I mean, in this case, there is this one example of the ram charging north, west, and south. Anyway, now the ram, the ram was going, where were we? West, north, and south. And in that instance, it is referring to the rams, Persia was in the east. So it's attacking to the west, north, and south because it already is coming from the east. But for the most part, we orient our directions around Israel. So I believe in this, we are orienting ourselves towards the beautiful land, which is Israel. And so the small horn is growing in power to the south and to the east of the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens, and it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. Now this is not referencing fighting a bunch of angels, because this horn is coming up from the horns of the beast, the goat. And well, we'll get to the interpretation in a moment, but we're not talking about him fighting angels or something like that. It set itself up to be as great as the prince of the host. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was brought low. Because of rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to the host of the saints. So now that's the host he's fighting. We're not talking about the heavenly host, like the angelic hosts. We're not talking about those hosts. We're talking about the host of the saints, who here are pictured as part of the starry host, so they're considered to be part of the armies of heaven. But right now, we're not talking about him making war against we'll get that in a minute. Making war against the heavenly host. He's making war against the saints on earth. Because of rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the wicked ones overcome, and they throw truth to the ground. Usually it's because the righteous ones aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Most of the time, the success of the wicked comes about as a result of the failures of the righteous. Then I heard a Holy One speak. We're seeing that play out in real time in front of us, by the way. The righteous ones were not exactly righteous in the past decades, and now we're seeing truth get thrown to the ground. Because in years gone by, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the righteous ones were not being righteous. Then I heard a Holy One speaking, and another Holy One said to him, "How long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice. the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and of the host that will be trampled underfoot. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. Now, before we go any further, I want to go back and read something very important here in the book of Exodus, because that will help us understand what we're talking about when it talks about evenings and mornings and daily sacrifices. It says at the beginning of the giving of the law, Exodus 29, he's giving the instructions for how to consecrate the priests. And he says then, after that, starting in verse 38, he goes on to say this. This is what you are to offer on the altar regularly each day. 2 lambs, a year old. Offer one in the morning and the other at twilight. With the first lamb, offer 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of oil from pressed olives, and 1/4 of a hin of wine as a drink offering. Sacrifice the other lamb at twilight. It's the same grain offering and its drink offering as in the morning. So the exact same thing, just a different time of day. A pleasing aroma, an offering made to the Lord by fire. For the generations to come, this burnt offering is to be made regularly at the entrance to the tent of meeting before the Lord. There I will meet you and speak to you. There I will meet with the Israelites, and the place will be consecrated by my glory. So this is something they were supposed to do every day. They offered 2 sacrifices every day on behalf of the whole nation, one in the morning and one in the evening. So that is what's being taken away here. That's what we're talking about. Now, so let's go ahead and continue reading, and then we'll see if we can figure out what this means. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. He wasn't a man, but he looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. And so we have the name of an angel now. We have not had the name of an angel given to us before, but now we have been given the name of one of God's many hosts of angels. And he came near the place where I was standing. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, remember the Son of Man? Ezekiel was given that title a whole lot in the book of Ezekiel. And we talked about one like a Son of Man coming to meet the Ancient of Days, being escorted to his presence in chapter 7. The Son of Man basically just means human. And one like a human in Daniel 7 means one like a human. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. Now we hear this phrase, and we think all kinds of things. Our minds immediately start talking about like the end of the world. Okay, and that is just not the way that phrase is used. That's just not the case. Okay, the time of the end means the time of the end of anything. It doesn't mean the time of the end of the world. It doesn't mean the time. Oh, goodness gracious. Cats. It just means the time of the end of anything. Okay, in this case, it's the time of the end. In this case, it's actually the time of the end of the Grecian Empire's dominance over Israel, as we'll find out. But so we see this expression and we just immediately think about the end of the world, but that's not what this actually refers to. It just means the time of the end of anything. And in this context, it's the time of the end of the Grecian Empire's dominance over Israel.